All right, let's talk comedy. Today, we're going to break down a really powerful technique to make your comedy scripts not just funnier, but way more sustainable. And look, if you're a student writer, this is honestly one of the most practical tools you can stick in your back pocket. Okay, so here's the game plan. First, we're going to figure out a super common problem that makes a lot of scripts just run out of gas. Then, we'll build the solutions step by step. After that, we'll get into the 4 core rules for creating conflict, and we'll wrap it all up with the details that make the whole thing sing. All right, first up, let's look at a fundamental structural issue, a little gremlin that can make even the absolute best comedy ideas just fall flat. So, have you ever had this happen? You write a scene, it starts with a bang, it's hilarious, but then halfway through, it just kind of loses its punch? Well, if you have, you are definitely not alone. And the reason for it is usually a lot simpler and more structural than you might think. A lot of us, especially when we're just starting out, we think in terms of a simple 2-point opposition, right? Hero versus villain. It's a straight line. But great comedy, the kind that lasts, it needs more than that. It doesn't need a line. It needs a box. And here's why. The crucial thing to get is that comedy is social. It's all about how different people clash inside a system. Your characters have to form a complete microcosm, a little mini society. You know, think about The Office in The Office or The Bar in Cheers. A simple hero versus villain fight just can't create that kind of rich comedic world. Okay, so let's get to the solution. Let's see how we can actually build this thing. We are going to construct what's called the 4-point opposition, or what I like to call your comedy box. So here's a little exercise for you, a core drill. Get out a piece of paper and literally draw a box. Put your hero in one corner and then map your 3 main opponents to the other 3 corners. This little visual exercise forces you to maximize the distance between them, and that distance, well, that's where all the conflict and comedy comes from. And what's really cool is how this comedy box changes depending on the kind of story you're telling. So in a single hero comedy, something like Beverly Hills Cop, you have your hero and then 3 very distinct opponents. But check out the dynamic in a 3-character story, like Ghostbusters. The hero, who's the understater, the classic Bill Murray type, is actually opposed by his 2 friends, the overstaters. It's a totally different dynamic. All right, so we've got our characters in the box. Now let's talk about the 4 fundamental rules for actually creating that opposition, for building up the tension between these characters. Think of these 4 rules as your personal toolkit. They're 4 completely different ways to make sure your characters stay fundamentally different and in conflict, not just for one scene, but for the entire story. First up, you got to think about their basic comic DNA. Are they a machine, someone who understates everything, super dry, deadpan delivery, or are they a child who overstates everything, just full of emotion and drama? When you pair these 2 types up, you get instant comic tension. I mean, a show like The Golden Girls is an absolute masterclass in this. You've got Dorothy as the machine, Rose as the child, and Blanche, well, she's the animal. But that's a whole other explainer for another day. Next, you want to make your characters opposites in power, and if it works for your story, in gender. A boss versus a worker, a parent versus a child. These are differences that last. The opposition can't just go away, which is exactly what you need to keep the comedy going for 90+ pages. And this might just be the most important rule of all. Your character's conflict has to come from their different worldviews. It's not just about what they want, it's about what they believe. They need to have completely opposite ideas about how the world works. That's the real engine of the conflict. Okay, we've got the blueprint, the structure is there. Now, let's get into the fun stuff, the details. This is where we go from the big picture to the specific jokes that are going to bring your comedy to life. So for your opponents to be funny, they can't just be dangerous. We have to be able to laugh at them. And to do that, you need what's called a comic gap. It's that little bit of space, that weakness between the high of who they think they are and the low of who they really are. Now, this is a really fine line to walk, right? Think about the ghosts in Ghostbusters. Yeah, they're scary, they create danger, but nobody actually gets hurt. Or what about the drill sergeant in Private Benjamin? All bark, but no deadly bite. The characters are diminished, sure, but they're never completely destroyed. You should definitely lean into the classic contrasts, the ones that have been making people laugh for centuries. The whole country versus city thing you see in a movie like Crocodile Dundee, that's a perfect example. It's a fundamental opposition that just keeps working because it's so clear and everyone can relate to it. Okay, now here's the secret sauce. This is the key insight that so many writers miss. You have to attach specific values to those contrasts. It is not enough for your characters to just be different. You have to define what they're fighting about on a much deeper level. So let's take that country versus city example again. It's not really just about location, is it? It's about honesty and direct dealing versus fast talking and a me-first attitude. You can immediately see how that creates way richer, more specific chances for conflict and jokes. It's the difference between a character just being rich and a character who believes that money is the only thing that matters. See the difference? And really, this is the main takeaway. Do not be afraid to push your characters to the absolute extremes. Don't let them get all mushed up together in the center. The more distance you can create between them, the more room you have for plot, and more importantly, for laughs. So as you go off and start your next project, or maybe even as you revise the one you're working on right now, just ask yourself this question. By defining those four corners as clearly as possible, you can build a stronger, funnier, and much, much more sustainable comedic world.